Arman Tsarukyan gets a massive win by second-round submission, and boy, was it needed. Look, we all know what happened. Arman was scheduled to fight Islam Makhachev Part 2, and Arman pulled out with either back injury and or a weight miss. Dana White was very unhappy. Dana White felt like Arman could have fought. Regardless, no one knows, but the UFC was not happy with that late pullout, with kind of damaging that card to that degree. And then Islam moves up to 170. And look, this was a big one. If Dan Hooker won, especially by knockout, Arman was probably going to get cut. He was going to get cut. He was going to get bumped outside the top 10 in the rankings. It was going to be bad. And it was a tough matchup. Look, obviously, Arman was the heavy favorite, but Dan Hooker is a formidable guy, and he's tough. So this was a big one for Arman. Look, we have to have a serious discussion about Arman not being the obvious next man up. Look, in his last 10, he's won, 11? I know he's got one loss to Gamrot by decision. But, I mean, since the Islam fight, and obviously he was supposed to rematch Islam, win. And these are all big wins. I mean, Dan Hooker, submission. Charles Oliveira, who ended up fighting for the title. It was a split decision, but I think he definitely won that one. TKO over Benny, and then a bunch of volume here. Now, in terms of the lightweight division, obviously we have Topuria, who potentially could be moving up to fight Islam. But look, we got to have some action at the lightweight division. What are we going to do? Are we going to wait for Ilya to fight Islam at the White House card, and we won't have and then he's going to wait another 6 months to fight if he's going to come back down? Look, we have to have a lightweight fight next year, because if Ilya is going to move up to 170 in July, there's not going to be a single lightweight title fight in the entirety of 2026. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So Arman is the obvious next challenger. Charles just lost, and I know he just won, but Charles is not going to get another shot. He also had the pullout incident. Max Holloway, I don't think he's done enough. He's already lost to Ilya, obviously. Loses a little bit of his luster. And he had so many title shots down at 145. Justin Gaethje, look, he thinks he deserves it. I don't see any world where Justin Gaethje deserves it. Maybe if a Gaethje were to if he were to beat a Paddy Pimblett, who we're getting ready to talk about, then yeah, sure, fine. If he knocks out Pimblett, okay, fine, he can jump Tsarukyan. But Max Holloway would have to beat an Oliveira or Gaethje. If Holloway or Gaethje gets a win, then okay, maybe I'd be fine, which is how inactive Arman Tsarukyan's been. Other than that, though, I mean, who is going to get the next title shot at lightweight? Let's assume it's Ilya. If it is Ilya at that division, I think it's pretty obvious it's got to be Arman. It's pretty obvious. There is no debate. There is no Paddy Pimblett. Paddy should probably fight Holloway. If Holloway can get 2 wins at lightweight and kind of reestablish himself, then I think I'd be fine giving him the winner of Ilya and Arman. That makes sense. And kind of same thing with Gaethje. If any of these guys, Pimblett, Gaethje, Holloway, if any of these guys fight and win, I think they're next up. Hooker's obviously getting demoted. Charles, he would probably have to rack up 2 more wins for me to get that shot. Saint Denis, I'm just not feeling anybody else at that division. Now the other big fight, look, Ian Garry feels inevitable, and it's kind of weird because he just doesn't, for some reason, I'm trying to scroll down here to get to, there we go. Oh, went a little too far. It is kind of weird because he has this inevitable feeling in terms of his aura, in terms of his trash talk. But for some reason, he gives conflicting, almost Belal-like vibes. And, Belal ended up obviously getting the belt. But he won. He won by decision. He got 3 rounds. One judge only gave him 2, but he won pretty convincingly, I would say, at least from watching the fight. And once again, this isn't as obvious as Arman getting the shot. If Arman doesn't get the shot, I don't even know what to say. Especially if Ilya vacates. Arman's got to get one. If there's 2 opportunities and Arman's not one of them, I would be dumbfounded. But Ian Garry, if we look at the welterweight division, we have JDM, who's obviously not getting it. He just lost. He wasn't a dominant champion. Bilal Muhammad just lost to JDM and then just lost to Ian Garry, so he's not getting it. Morales is interesting. I don't think so. Shavkat, we're going to get to where it gets a little complicated. So, obviously, Garry. We'll go back to Garry over here. Obviously, Gary's strung together a couple wins since his loss to Shavkat. But look, he beat Jeff Neal. Oh, gotta scroll down a little bit. They want us to buy Theo Grace necklaces. Cool. Okay. He beat Bilal, obviously just happened. He beat Pratis recently. He lost to Shavkat, very close decision loss. Michael Page and Jeff Neal, so he's a bit of a decision merchant, but I don't think and I knew Carlos Prates just got a knockout over Leon, which matters. I don't think Prates can get a title shot before Ian Garry. If we're just looking at resumes, I don't think that would make sense because Ian's gotten 2 wins and one of them was over Prates. Now, I do understand that logic should apply to Shavkat, but if we go to Shavkat, gotta get to his fight history. Look, it's been a while since he's fought. We're nearing. It's been a whole year. It's been over a year, about to be by the time Rachmanov fights again. So I don't think Shavkat can get it. I mean, you've been out for. It's going to be about a year and 6 months by the time he fights again, and that wasn't by any means a dominant. That wasn't a dominant win. Before that he was having pretty solid wins. So I don't think Shavkat can get it just because it's like, if we're giving it to Shavkat, I'm just not super excited. Now, stylistically, it's definitely interesting, but I think it would be, I would probably say Gary's the most deserving. Now, if you give it to Usman, I understand. Usman, he just dominantly beat Buckley. Had a close decision with Hamzat, which looks really good now with how good Hamzat's been, and obviously lost twice to Leon Edwards. I don't think you can give it to Kamaru. I wouldn't mind it, but I don't think you can give it to Kamaru. So it's really between Shavkat, Morales, and Garry. Morales would definitely be exciting. I think to build up his luster, you would need one more fight. I think one more fight, and look, obviously he's on a 3-fight KO streak, or maybe even more than that, but I think what would make the most sense is, look, it's crazy, but I think Ian Garry fights for the title, fights Islam, if it's not Ilya. Look, if it's Ilya, that's fine. I don't mind Ilya cutting the line, but I think Michael Morales versus Kamaru Usman for a number one contender fight. If Kamaru wins, it's 2 fights in a row. The fight before that was a close loss to Kamaru. I think at that point Kamaru would be very deserving, and he's not, past his prime. He's on the back half of his prime for sure. If Michael Morales wins, especially by KO, then he's got, assuming Islam were to retain the title, then it's like, okay, this guy is very dangerous, and he can handle wrestling. So I think you build up Morales or you build up Kamaru. And I think Ian Garry probably deserves a shot right now.